fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Joining me today, co-host has been away for a while because he's been traveling all over the world, you know, and espionage agent, all that stuff. So, Mr. Gavin Stone, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I've missed it.
Well, you missed it. I could tell by all the pictures. You were smiling and everything, except for when you were, what were you trying to skateboard somewhere and someone?
Oh, yeah, that was recently here in the UK where I just say that I probably won't be going on a skateboard again for the rest of my life.
No, especially at your age.
Exactly. way too long in the tooth for that now.
Well, at least the medical's free, you know, so they can take care of you. Well, here we go. So we have a writer joining us today. She's a New York Times best-selling writer, and we're going to talk about the book called Ghostwriter. It's a novel, and it's Julie Clark. So thank you for coming on the show, Julie.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So now, Julie, before we get into the book itself, how did you get into the writing world? Like, what drew you into writing books?
Well, when I was young, I always wanted to write. I believe most of the writers of my age can blame Judy Blume for that. And I've always felt like that was something that I wanted to do. I love to tell stories, and I love to make people feel things and experience things that maybe they never would have. And so from a very young age, I would say probably elementary school, I wanted to write. But then, of course, life gets in the way, and you follow paths that pay your bills and give you good health insurance, because here in the U.S. you have to pay for that. And so, you know, it wasn't until I was in my early 40s, I want to say, that I really decided, like, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it. And so I started writing for publication at that time.
Was there something that gave you confidence to do it? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because you're putting it out there. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, too, right? You know, social media and all the different angles. You hear a lot of things from a lot of people you don't know.
Yes.
So it takes a little bit of courage to actually be first time and put a book out.
I mean, you know, the thing is that, you know, I decided I was going to write a book just to see if I could do it. So I didn't really tell anybody that I was writing a novel, because I didn't want people asking me, how's it going? Have you sold it yet? Like, when are we going to be able to buy it in a store? Because if you know anything about publishing, like, those questions are way, 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 way beyond the writing part. So I just wanted to see if I could do it. So I didn't even tell my family that I was writing a book until I actually finished it and started having to research, like, what's next? You know, you have to polish it up. You have to find a literary agent who can then sell it to a publisher and go from there. And I realized, like, I got a long way to go.
Wow, I think you're probably one of the most sensible authors I've met so far with that one.
Well, thank you, Gavin. I appreciate that.
That's intrigued me, because so many people do it the other way around, myself included in this, by the way. You know, you make the mistake of saying, I'm going to write a book, and 2 weeks later people are asking if it's finished. I noticed with the ghostwriting, you've written it in first person perspective. Was there any particular reason why you decided to take that route, or was this something that you normally do or just felt comfortable with, or was there a specific reason behind it?
With first person, it just feels a little bit more immediate, and you have a little bit more insight into characters and what they're thinking and feeling. And especially, for me, I find it interesting to see the difference between what a character is thinking and feeling versus what a character chooses to say or not say. And I feel like the reader can find a lot of tension in that space.
Yeah, and I suppose it also comes with the challenges as well of not being able to kind of go from an omniscient perspective where you can, you know, what other people are thinking. So, you know, what were the kind of challenges that you faced with writing from that first person perspective?
The main one being that you generally need to have a multi-POV novel in order to get inside other people's heads, which I think is also extremely important, especially as you're putting characters together in moments where they're sharing and recognizing that each one of them maybe isn't being honest with the other.
Well, what's your personal, like, how do you relate with your characters? Like, and I mean this when you're writing. Are you hearing them, seeing them, feeling them? Do you picture them? Or are they totally distant and not connected?
I don't really picture them other than a general build and hair color. Typically, their faces are completely blank to me in my mind. I just don't see them that way. But I feel them. I know I have a very strong sense of who they are when a book is done, not at the beginning. Who they are, what they would say or do in any situation, how they feel, what choices they would make. Like, I know them very well by the end of the process.
Is there a particular character you like writing, or are there ones that sort of give you more of a challenge that takes a lot longer for you to write?
It's different for every book. For the ghostwriter, I struggled with Olivia. She's a fairly closed-off character. She's had a lot of trauma in her childhood, and so she was a challenge to get down on the page in a way where the reader could be sympathetic with some of the choices that she's making. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not.
So for the readers or the listeners that don't know what the book is, what's the basic premise here?
The premise of the book is about a woman named Olivia Dumont, and she's a ghostwriter, and she's sort of become well known for ghostwriting memoirs of women who have sort of broken the glass ceiling in whatever their particular field is. And she unfortunately sort of blows up her career with an offhand comment and finds herself unable to get hired for jobs. And she's on the verge of financial ruin. She is almost about to have to, lose her house when her agent calls her with a pretty strange job offer. Vincent Taylor, who is famous for his horror novels, he's like Stephen King adjacent, wants her to ghostwrite his last novel. And Olivia does not want to take that job for a lot of reasons, mainly because Vincent Taylor is her estranged father and the cause of all of her trauma as a child. And what Vincent Taylor is even more famous for in the world is the fact that he is the only suspect in the 1975 murders of his older brother Danny and younger sister Poppy. And so when Olivia is forced to take that job and go home to Ojai and sort of reckon with her father, she learns pretty quickly that it's not a novel that he wants her to write. It's the memoir of what happened in 1975, because even though he had an alibi, he remained the only suspect, and he's never spoken of it until now.
Now, do you place a subtext or a meaning in the story behind everything people read, under the entertainment, so to speak?
Oh, definitely, yes. I mean, I don't feel like a book is a really strong book unless there's some kind of growth emotionally from my characters. And I'm constantly asking myself the question, like, what's this book really about? Like, what are the things that I want the reader walking away feeling, believing, knowing, whatever, that's not necessarily plot related, but more like humanity related, I would say.
You mentioned earlier that you get to know your characters as you're writing the book, and then as it progresses, by the end of the book, you feel you know them really, really well. Yeah. When that happens, do you then find yourself going back to the beginning and wanting to rewrite or add parts? And how many times do you do that before you find yourself saying enough is enough?
I mean, yes, I'm constantly, as soon as something occurs to me, so if I'm halfway through a book and I realize, oh my gosh, my character would never do this or say this as I'm getting to know them, on revision, yes, you go back to the beginning, and as you're reading through and revising, you're fixing their personality to match what you've come to realize it needs to be. So I would say drafting for me, like a first draft, takes maybe 3 months to get 60,000 words, but revision takes a year. So, you're really living with these people for a long time. And, at the beginning, it's hard and time intensive and not always enjoyable. But by the end of that time, you know so quickly and easily how they will react to things that, adding new scenes is not that challenging because you just know what they'll say, you know what they'll do. You kind of just need a framework for what it is that needs to happen.
So with that in mind, how much of an overlap of Olivia Dumont and Julie Clark is there? Is there any at all, or are they two completely different people?
I would say, and most authors I know would say, that there's a part of us in every single character we write. Because I'm constantly asking myself, well, what would I do? How would I react? And there's always elements, I think, of me in every single character, including Vincent Taylor, the supposed suspected murderer.
So the evil comes out in you as well when you write stories.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I'm allowed to say and do things in my books that I would never do in real life. But, that's the beauty of reading, is that, as a reader, you get to experience all kinds of situations, events, circumstances that you would never want to experience in your own personal life or ever have the opportunity to experience. And, that they say that's how you build empathy, and I believe that to be true. Even with unlikable characters or characters who are doing things that you absolutely disagree with and hate, like, those are the moments, I think, where real empathy can be born because, even though you don't like what they're doing or you don't like what they're saying, if you can stop and have some empathy for where they came from and why they're making those choices, like that just builds your empathy muscle in your real life as well.
Right. It's important. Well, when you come out of something like this, so you spent, a year and a half, let's say, living with these characters and putting the novel together and going through the revision, at the end of it, do you think the whole experience of writing the novel changes you, or does it affect you in some way?
I think so. I mean, it's the same as reading, except for a little bit more lengthened and probably more intimate, and that comes from just scenes that you've written that you don't end up using. So it's sort of like I know a lot about my characters that my readers will never know because I wrote scenes that never made it into the book. And so, it's like any kind of relationship, except for the fact that these are people who are not real. They live only in the imagination of me first, and then obviously later on my readers.
As long as you can separate them.
Yes, for sure.
Well, and so what happens to the characters then when the book's done and it's over, and now you're out promoting and it's past? Do they still live with you in some cases, or do they just all disappear?
I think in some way they're like people I used to know. I can imagine, my characters out there doing things and, living their lives and, and whatnot. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about them. Like, I don't, miss them or anything. I miss the ease at which I could write them when I'm in a new project and it's not quite so easy. I wish I could just sit down and write a Poppy scene or write an Olivia scene versus a new scene in a book that I'm working on right now. That would be nice. But, no, I think like with any relationship that's over, it just is over.
Do you ever meet somebody out in the world and you detest them, or somebody you've maybe even known for years, you detest them that much that you think, what, I'm going to have to put you in the character of a book and kill you off or do something along those lines? Does that urge ever come into your mind? Not
really. I mean, I feel like I have friends who are like, can you please put this person in a book and make them do something really ridiculous? And, of course you laugh and say, sure. But no, I don't really do that because the characters that I write are their own sort of iteration of a lot of different traits. They can't just be one person.
Are you, when you put the book together and you're writing, let's say, the murder or the amount of violence that you put into a book or sex or any of that, when you're drawing the line of how you're going to write that, do you think about the reader as you write it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm always, as a writer, I read as a writer. So when I'm reading a book, I'm always reading it through the lens of a writer. But as a writer, I'm writing through the lens of a reader with the same questions, that readers have. Like, what do I want to have happen next? What am I hoping to see? And what would surprise me? And those are questions that I always have in my head as I write.
What do you find the biggest challenge in writing a thriller like this?
Pacing is always a challenge, especially at first, as you're just trying to get the story down, and just kind of accepting that, you're telling yourself the story at first as well. I think first drafts are always a challenge for me. I don't really enjoy them. And I always compare it to building a house, right? I would much rather decorate a house than frame one. But you have to frame a house before you can choose paint colors and fixtures and all of those things. And writing a book is very similar. You have to do a lot of really heavy lifting first to get the shape of it to where you want it to be, and make sure everything aligns and matches up. And, and the revision part is my favorite part, which is the subtle tweaking of character, of motivation, of emotion, of emotional arcs, as well as, narrative arcs. All of that part is my favorite part.
Well, the premise of this with the whole kind of, the facing of the demons and that kind of thing, but are there kind of, sub areas or sub categories, as it were, of like bridges or that the character has to pass in order to get to the, how does it all come together at the end?
Characters have to fail. I don't think a book is very interesting if characters have something that they need to do and then all of a sudden that was pretty easy and it's done. Characters have to spend some time struggling, and I think the readers show up for that part, right? They show up for the struggle so that when things finally happen or work out or get figured out or revealed or whatever, it's a reward for them as well. But I think the way that you can do that effectively, especially if you're trying to create an emotional arc for a character, is to kind of play against what a character wants versus what a character needs. And if you can create a character whose desire is at odds or opposed with what they actually need, then you have some really terrific tension to work with.
Oh, I love that. That was my follow-on question was going to be, for the budding writers out there, how do you go about like kind of putting emotion on the page each time to keep them kind of invested? And that kind of answered the question a little bit, but if there's anything you'd like, that'd be wonderful.
Again, like I think you want to have your character reacting to situations that are out of their control to start. And then as they start to move and grow and learn and progress in whatever the struggle is that they're encountering, at some point there needs to be some event or some knowledge or some revelation that allows them to transition from react to action, to taking some agency and moving forward with that agency. Even though they may still be failing, there's an energy shift when your character moves into agency.
Where do you think your ideas come from? Do you have a particular place, or
no?
Is it a
I have
dream?
no idea. No, none. I don't have a book. I don't have a little journal with book ideas. I typically get an idea for a book midway through working on whatever book I'm working on, and I think sometimes it's sort of like the grass is always greener. Like, I wish I could be working on something else because this book is annoying and I'm tired of it. And that's usually when an idea will pop into my head, and I just let it sit. And if it's not, I don't write it down. I don't mark it in any way. I just think about it, and if I can remember it at the end of working on whatever book I'm working on, then I know that that's an idea that has stuck around and has some staying power and perhaps is my next idea.
Do you have a favorite writer besides Gavin and myself, of course?
I would say, my favorites are Jodi Picoult, Anna Quindlen, Barbara Kingsolver, Tana French. Just for beauty of language, artistic style, all of the above, plus just fantastic stories.
What makes a good book for you? Is it that, or is it the character? Like, what do you have a particular item that you think is key to making a book classic?
For me, books are especially good if they have really strong character development. That, for me, as a writer and as a reader, I show up for the character development. Plot's wonderful, but in my opinion, plot cannot sustain me across 350 or so pages of just plot alone. And opinions on that vary. There are a lot of people who are like, I don't really care about the character, just give me a really great heart-pumping story. And but for me, character, all the way character.
Well, I think character is what keeps people coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
You
it
know what
keeps
I mean?
them emotionally invested because you begin to care about the people who are encountering these situations.
Yeah, and even years later, if you have great characters, it can be rewritten and
Right.
reused and reissued,
Yeah.
right? And because people really like that. Character's important
Yes.
in that way, you know. Wow. So, listen, do you like to have people contact you? Do you do social media? Do you do website?
Yeah.
How do you like it?
I am on Instagram, Julie Clark Author, and I have a website, julieclarkauthor. I think it's .com. But definitely Julie Clark Author. It should pop up. And yeah, so you can reach me through my website. There's a contact form, and also on Instagram.
Well, fantastic. So what's Julie working on now? What's going on behind the scenes?
Well, I just finished the tour for the Ghostwriter. I have a few events like this week to just kind of wrap up. And then my hope for July is to get to work on my next book in earnest. I'm looking at sort of a speculative thriller for my next chapter.
Well,
Yeah.
great. Do you do a lot of book shows, or do you do any of those sort of events?
Sometimes I'm typically busiest right before publication. I've been actually doing events for the Ghostwriter since February of this year, traveling a bit for that. And then obviously once the book releases, book tours are pretty hectic. It's been hectic for about 3 weeks. And now, now I think we're moving into the quieter phase. So it'll be nice for me to kind of get some rest and some writing work done. But I'll be doing events here and there probably well into the fall. I think I'm in Louisiana in November at the book festival there, and I think a couple other things I can't really recall.
Okay. Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We'll have all of your stuff, including the book and your website, up on ours. So we appreciate it. Now, the book, it's called The Ghostwriter. It's a novel. And Julie Clark is the author. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.